Hi, welcome back to this deep dive series, looking this time at both my concept car collection and my one-off collection. I'm hoping that by this stage in these deep dives you've seen the full garage tour, the musical chill out one, it's linked below. Please watch that first if you haven't. Otherwise we'll stick with the same format, a brief description of each car and a photo of the one that inspired it, a little bit of other information on how it drives, crew colours, etc. We're going to start off with the concept cars. Starting off with the Coquette BlackFin. Now, although it's based on a Corvette C1, it's primarily based on the C1 RS, which was a sketch design by RS Roadsters, I think they're called, and it was for SEMA 2009. Fantastic looking hot rod design, and of course it looks brilliant in the game if you simply build it as the concept that it was based on. It has a lovely noise when you drive it, quite a unique noise, and the handling is much more neutral than you would expect, although of course it does oversteer eventually. You can even put a roof on it and do other things to it if you want to customise it differently. You'll have seen the stamp on the top right, it's discontinued, but at the time this video comes out, and for a few more days, it's available from the LS Car Meet. I do think it's something you should seriously consider. The Ferrari F80 was a design by Adriano Reilly, I hope I've got that correct, an Italian designer. I don't believe there's an actual affiliation here with Ferrari. He was designing a 300 mile an hour supercar, and the looks of course are absolutely stunning. The only question remains, how come there's one in the collection if it didn't really exist? Anyway, when you drive it, there's a sort of F1 type noise. It can be a little tail happy, and when it drifts it's fun. It's very expensive, I will say, at 2.7 million. But if you want to know more, I've done a full review on it, and I really urge you to watch that review. It will give you a real good taster for the car. Our next car is the Toreador, and I imagine everybody's bought a Toreador anyway, but perhaps doesn't know what it's based on. It's based on the Lamborghini Marzal, which was a one-off concept car, but it was a drivable concept and very futuristic for the time. It never hit full production, but it was the basis later on for the Lamborghini Espada. The Espada is the sword that is used to kill the bull by the Toreador, so you can see now where the name came from. The price has gone up on this one, I think. It says 4.2 million on the wiki, but as you know, it's got rocket boost, it could be a submarine, it's got guns, it's got missiles, you can store it on your Kasatka. So as well as being a great concept car, it's also a really fun car to use. Mine's been silver as it should be for 2 or 3 years, so I decided to reimagine the car this year because she's bought it, she can do what she wants with it. So it's in Koenigsegg RSR blue, and that's on the interior and the exterior because that's how the original car was, and the code for that is down on the bottom there. Despite the price and the slight increase, I recommend this car on very many levels. You can save the money for the Toreador by not buying the next car. The Apollo Arrow is the real name of the car, the Tyrant in game. It was a concept designed by not only Apollo but Scuderia Cameron Glickenhaus as well. But despite all the talk and the show car in more than one colour, it never came to fruition. Not only this, but the size of the car is ridiculous. It's massively out of scale compared with other cars in the game. It's got these so-called advanced handling flags, so as you're driving along the engine is sort of like that all the time. Really annoying. It affects it over bumps as well. Then it's $2.5 million. Unless you want it for your concept collection, I highly recommend avoiding this car. Thankfully things pick up dramatically with the next car, which you will see driving in the outro as well. The Ferrari Xezri, if I've said that at all correctly, Competizione edition. So the Xezri was a concept car by a young Russian designer, Samir Sadikov. Again, there's no affiliation with Ferrari. Stunning looking car. Then he went back and designed it again as the Competizione edition. So I think last year I did the standard one. This year I found there were enough liveries in there to make this edition. So you can make either edition out of your Visione. It's a really fun car. I really like the car, to be honest with you. It's a lovely drive. I would describe it as like driving the Nero, but you can have a little bit more oversteer, drift it slightly easier. It's got quite a decent top speed, a nice V12 sound. It's not cheap at 2.25 million, but if you want something to bump up a Ferrari collection or a concept collection and you enjoy driving the cars that you've bought, yeah, this one's pretty good. I'm not a fan of the next one, to be honest with you. It is of course the Oppressor MkII. I used to think it was based on nothing, but it turned out that BMW and Lego got together and made a concept, a futuristic concept, called the BMW R1200GSA Hover Ride. Of course there was never a real one, and it's very difficult to see how it could ever really work, and the price has now gone up to something ridiculous. I used to use this a lot. I think it was then designated my favourite bike, so whenever I get on it my character is automatically healed. I used it for quite a while as a grinding machine to earn money, and it is superlative for this, of course. But at the end of the day, I found it made things very boring and very easy. And if I'm going to use an aircraft, I'll use something else in the hangar, maybe the Savage, or the new Ride U now, of course, is also pretty good. I use the Sparrow a lot. I realise it's used a lot by griefers. It's a bit sad. I don't really care about that. I don't even play in public lobbies anymore. I know the missiles have been nerfed. I think we just move on. You know if you want it, you know if you don't. But it's interesting to know that there is at least some basis of reality on the car, bike thing. Well, we're halfway now, and that's the 6 concept cars. 6 cars that never even got off the paper in many cases. If you're enjoying this or having any value, I'm still desperately trying to grow the channel. If you could hit that like button right now before you forget, it would be appreciated. I think our first entrant would be really scary in real life. The Blastolene Rocket 2 Trike is the Rampant rocket in game. I think Rampant is a good description. The real one has a 1,000 horsepower engine. Can you imagine that sitting in that long trike? Must be pretty scary to drive, but in the game it's actually better than you'd think and much easier than you would think to drive, and it has a certain cool factor, I think, to it as well. I think you can store it with your bikes, but then it looks a bit strange, far too big already for that sort of place to put it. It's 925,000, and I really do see it as a collector's vehicle only. Although it's fun, I'm still not too sure why anybody would want it. But anyway, moving on now to the Nightshade. It's a one-off creation based on a 1970 Camaro, and it looks really good. Those wide arches are perhaps the most defining feature of this very upgraded car. It's an okay drive in the game. It remains almost unchanged from last year. I do have simply crew black on it rather than normal black. I do wish we could take the arches off and do some other Camaro based builds on it, but as it is I feel restricted really in keeping it as Spectre. Ringbrothers do some very interesting conversions on old muscle cars, and one of those is to a Javelin AMX, and they turned it into the one they call Defiant, hence Deviant in the name. It's only about 500k, but it is discontinued. And while this means you'll have to wait for it to come back, you may not be that bothered unless you want this specific build, because at the end of the day it's just an okay muscle car to drive and costs over $500,000. On the flip side, I do think there's enough flexibility to build a normal Javelin AMX in here, so that's always one possibility for you as well. Every year I've struggled with the colour and I've kept changing it. I've hit one I rather like this year. You saw it on the introduction out in the sunlight. The pearl does shine through onto the black, but I think it works. This next wild looking supercar is the Bugatti Vision Gran Turismo, and it's based on the Chiron, but it's souped up of course and quite altered in the looks department. The real car is valued at something like $20 million, but you don't need that much in the game. You simply need to take your Nero and $600,000 down to Benny's, and you'll find all sorts of customization there. So if you'd like to make weird or unreal looking cars, that's your prerogative and you can do that with it. There's also the parts there of course to make this particular car, and that's what interested me, and I suspect a lot of viewers of this channel. Of course, to build this you lose your Nero, so if you want both, which I have, you end up having to have 2 Neros, and you're going to find they drive the same. There's an insignificant top speed advantage to the custom. So let's look at another one-off. I'm hoping this was one that surprised a lot of people on the tour, not just to see a normal red Ferrari F40. This is the Competizione edition. It's a one-off, it's around 1,000 horsepower, and it looks very menacing in this particular colour scheme and wheel colour. I suspect you're going to be quite interested to read about this real car, so I'm going to put a link down below for that one. Otherwise, as you know, it's one of the top cars in the sports classics class to race. It is a nice car to drive around the place, and if you're on next gen, you can do the HSW upgrade and really give it some relevant performance, and I assure you, if I was, I would do that instantly. Last car for the deep dive is the champion, the Aston Martin Victor. You can see, of course, where the name came from. The Victor is a wonderful one-off creation, really designed by an Aston Martin customer to be made for him by Aston Martin. I do have a review on this car. It was a long time ago. I suspect it was the gaming microphone, etc., but perhaps you would like to watch it. I'll remember to link that down below for you. It is overall a pretty fun car to drive, but it's not the be-all and the end-all, certainly, for driving. It's pretty expensive, ranging from 2.8 to 3.7 million, depending on whether you have the trade price for doing the studio time mission. It's also quite an oversteery car. It can spin out quite a lot. It does take Imani tech, but from what I understand of that tech, you'd rather put it on something like the Omnis EGT than you would on this anyway. So I think it's glorious. I think it's wonderful to have the Aston Martin Victor in my collection. But if you don't think the same way, then you probably will want to save the cash and avoid this car. Well, that was 2 garages there really for the price of one. I really hope you enjoyed that and got some value from it. Any comments below on the format of what I'm doing or how you're enjoying these deep dives, anything I could alter would be very beneficial. And as I mentioned before, if you had any benefit, please do consider a like. And not to mention, of course, a sub if you like real cars in GTA, because that's what the channel is about. Next week we're moving into the sports collection, and I think to do all 14 is going to be too much to do in one video, so I'm going to split that into 2, so we'll do 7 of them next week. But I'm fairly sure there's going to be a little track battle in there as well. I'm going to leave you with a few seconds of the glorious sound of this car before we finally close, but thank you so much for watching.